Good morning and welcome back to WKNI TV 25, and we're proud to have Chief McDonald from OP. Chief, thanks for coming on again.
Good to see you.
Glad you found the right studio. It is confusing, folks. We had hoped to be in the new studio today and have you as our first guest, but USA Mail, kind of slowed things down a little bit, I guess, and we didn't get the parts that we needed yet, and hopefully that'll change this week, and we'll have you come back and you can be at the new studio. We're excited. It's looking great over there. We've got some new things going up and a lot more room. And
An exciting time, huh?
It is. It is. And it's the right time for the community as well. And we're going to be right there on the square in Andalusia. But anyway, glad you found the right location. And Chief, we were talking about it off camera before we came on. Things aren't what they used to be.
Pick an area.
Anywhere. I mean, if you go into, crime, it's not what it used to be. It's a whole different set of crime now. That when me and you were growing up, it was robberies and rapes and things like that. And now I just read how many names on the JDR, 51 names, okay? And I would dare to say the majority of them are drug related.
It sounded like it.
It
It sounded like it, yeah.
And that's not just because it's the big bus that y'all had over in Op area the other day. That's every day almost on the JDR. It has
It's
something
true.
to do with drugs.
And that's most unfortunate. That's a kind of a sad commentary.
Well, in Op, y'all seem to be nipping it in the bud, as I like to say.
We're trying to be proactive, Eddie. I can't sit here and tell anyone that, boy, we've solved the problem now. That's not the truth. But what we do want to do is let the people, most particularly that have decided they want to make their living or supplement their living by selling drugs illegally, whether it's pills or methamphetamine or powdered cocaine or crack cocaine, and let them know that you're not going to do this with impunity. We are taking those steps to try to, one, get you identified, and two, resolve the issue with you.
Well, and not just with you, but with the community, because it's not an individual issue, it's a community issue when drugs are involved.
Drugs do nothing but hurt your community, whether it's your city or your community out in a county location. They keep you from progressing forward. Drugs take people from your workforce or your available workforce. They take people from that. If people are still working and they're involved with using this drug or that drug, it takes away from their efficiency and their productivity. Drugs are a plague. Drugs will generate a lot of our burglaries, a lot of our thefts. Drugs can generate some of our assaults, some of our domestic situations. So they are really a driving force behind a lot of the crime we have right here in Covington County. And they're everywhere. I don't want anyone to think, well, boy, they've got a terrible drug problem in Op, as opposed to anywhere else. We do. We recognize we have people that sell drugs. We have people that use drugs. Basically, our approach is to bring the drug task force to bear on it, along with our law enforcement partners, the Alabama Beverage Control Board. And I certainly tell you that Lieutenant Von Holland has picked right up with ABC. He has hit the ground running. And their support for this most recent operation was just absolutely critical. And support they did, but I've always found if we needed ABC for a special event, or as an example, if we found a big house party going on or we learned of one, they're always there, Johnny, on the spot. We're very, very pleased with the support we get from the ABC folks here. So we're trying to be proactive. We are trying to not just arrest people that we catch in possession of this or that. What we're trying to do is, when we have the opportunity, when it avails itself, we're trying to go and get the people that are selling the drugs, or I guess I should say allegedly selling the drugs, and proceed from there. And the support we've had from ABC, the support we've had from the Drug Task Force, and the support we've had from the District Attorney's Office has just been sterling. And this will not be the last operation that will be ran in op. And we will continue to try to clean it up some. And we'll try to make some of our areas within our community that the residents feel a little bit better about what's going on. I might add that in a couple of cases during the arrest Friday, or actually Thursday, there were people out clapping as people were being put in cars. They knew what was going on and they were glad to see it stop.
Chief, the problem in op is not, like you say, it's just not a problem in op. It's in the county, it's in the state, and it's nationwide. And there's so many designer drugs coming out now, so many of these so-called like spice and things like that are coming out to things that you can buy off the shelf and just make at home, just like meth came in, and then there's controls on that. By the time we end up trying to control everything that you can make something that'll get you high. I just saw one on TV, and I got to say, we're in television business, and I think the media is the worst thing ever when it comes to these types of issues, because they show you how to make these things right on TV, and you know, that's a problem. But in the city of Op, just over the past year, I can count on my hand 3 locations that I've been with you on. I can't remember the streets, but there's 2 houses that we went to for drugs, and there's the white big house there, the house with the apartment in the back or whatever that we can't remember the street there.
Jackson Street.
Jackson Street, and that house, the people that were in that house have been arrested several times, and I dare say they've been rearrested again. And the other house that we were at, the same thing. These people that we had arrested on Thursday, I know I've read their names, the majority of them, on the JDRs before. Mm-hmm. With the popularity of, I call them designer drugs, with the popularity of being able to get the products more easily, is this not just an endless battle for law enforcement? I mean, is there any way that you or your mayor has been phenomenal in getting involved and stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, hands, gloves off, and, do what you got to do, Chief, and Drug Task Force, and get this eradicated in our community? Is eradication a possibility?
It's hard to say, Eddie. Over my experience, and I've been involved in law enforcement now 36 years, and I can remember when I was in investigations several years ago in op.
Just a few years ago.
Just a few. We ran basically the same type of operation that DTF has just finished. And I can remember when we were finished with that operation and we had obtained our grand jury indictments, that we went out and arrested 36 people in op for multiple sales of illegal drugs. And it was mostly marijuana and crack cocaine. This time, on Thursday, they arrested 14. Now, prior to that, they had arrested 3 or 4. I think our population in general has to stand up and say, hey, look, we're tired of it. I think that some of these people need to spend more time in jail, particularly those that are actually selling these things. I think our district attorney's office is trying to do that. But what they run into is the Department of Corrections basically have more people within their facilities than they have reservations for, and they have their own set of problems. Where do we put these folks? I know Sheriff Meeks has to hold a lot of these people that had been sentenced state prisoners. He has to hold them within the Covington County Jail. That causes him a backlog. I dare say, I was talking to Sheriff Meeks last week, of course, during part of the operation itself, and I believe he told me he was like 250 folks in his jail. And now that's prior to us putting these people in his jail. I think the rehabilitative efforts, we have to look at that primarily, of course, for the abusers themselves. we have got to really put some teeth into these efforts, and you're going to participate in this program and that program and that program, and woe unto you if you reoffend or if you fail to meet the conditions of these programs. And that's what our DA is trying to do. They have to make a decision on who they think the program will work for. And we have to remember that when crack cocaine actually made its appearance in this area, and I'm going to tell you that was probably right around 1985. That was a phenomena for us, just like it was other parts of the nation. You know, what is this? And basically we had to learn how to work it. I had started with the Opp Police Department in '88, and crack cocaine had really begun to raise its head. And so that was a phenomena that law enforcement basically had to make some modifications or adjustments to address. The next phenomena, of course, probably came with the onslaught of methamphetamine in all the labs. For a couple of years, that's all DTF was doing, was hitting one red phosphorus lab after another. It was just boom, boom, boom. Prior to that, of course, we'd seen the methamphetamine coming in on trucks. And so we knew we had methamphetamine, in some cases crystal here. We found some crystal way back then. But that was a phenomenon that, again, that law enforcement had to adjust to. Now, I think the most recent phenomena that we're going to find ourselves involved in more and more is going to be crystal. And of course, that's just a cleaner form of meth. But that is a product that is being sold by the Mexican cartel. If folks don't watch that show, and I know it comes on around lunchtime on National Geographic, I'm plugging a station here, but Border Wars.
Yes.
If you're not aware of what the problem is, you need to watch that. It is absolutely incredible the tonnage of drugs they seize down there.
Daily.
The tonnage of U.S. currency going back south and weapons going back south. And they'll tell you, and they'll make mention of it periodically on this program, hey, we're skimming the top here. I can tell you that the Mexican cartel is active in this area. We know that. We know that most of the ice we're seeing is probably coming from the Mexican cartel, one of the cartel operations. And this creates another phenomena that law enforcement must adjust to. And you'll work that a little bit differently than you will other things that you've worked previously. And this is what they're going to have to do in order to defeat the cartel ice that's coming in, the cartel marijuana that's coming in. You'll see where DTF hit a fairly large domestic grow here the last 10 days. That was a good pop. But most of your marijuana is coming from the south. And we depend on our law enforcement partners along the border to get as much as they can. We depend on DEA and the other law enforcement organizations to try to get as much of it as they can while it's en route. And then we deal with what arrives here.
Then we hope for Greg Jackson to be getting the rest of it.
Need them to be getting around. Spice, you mentioned spice.
Yes.
I'd like to caution parents, it's against the law here in Alabama. It is not in Florida. And of course, this is what germinated that arrest with that large spice haul, a couple weeks ago, 10 days ago. It was on its way to Alabama to be sold in a retail manner. I have seen a couple of people, and they were young folks, that had been placed under arrest by Opp officers that had consumed spice. And it's not a good thing. These people,
huge hallucinogenic.
These people are really erratic.
Right.
And I would urge parents, please, please, please know what your kids are doing. Know who they're with, know what they're doing. And it doesn't matter if it's spice or it's consuming alcoholic products. It's your job not to allow this to happen. And sometimes you have to get into your child's business. Normally, generally, usually, I find most kids don't like you getting into their business. But that's not a problem because you're the parent. please make sure your kids don't start getting involved with prescription pills or with spice, or for that matter, marijuana. And you can do that. You can do that if you're willing to. But we don't want to arrest your kids. We don't want to do that. But if we catch them, we're going to arrest them.
Chief, you brought up several things I'd like to talk about. We're going to take a quick commercial break here for a moment and come back. But when we come back, when you mentioned about, the DA's office, everybody's doing their job. And there's no question that everybody's doing their job. Rehabilitation, putting people out on parole and probation, the nonviolent criminals, that's overtaxing the other agencies as well. Because now you have to have parole officers and you have to add on to them, and the state's cutting back, the federal government's cutting back. It just seems endless of just actually letting people go. Don't answer this yet. I want you to think about it when we go to commercial break. But there's a huge void that happens. The DA does his job, and a good job, and he gets out there and he does his thing, and then they put these people into rehab. Then they have to be monitored. Then you have to, and there's just too much going on at one time. See what we can talk about when we get back on.
Tick a lock.
Remember, keep it real, keep God in it. We'll be back with more right after these messages. Thanks for tuning in with Chief McDonald. Good morning and welcome back to WKNI TV 25, and we are here once again with Chief McDonald from Alabama. And Chief, once again, welcome aboard to WKNI and our viewers out there, and talking about the situation that happened last Thursday. Actually, the drug arrests were made on Wednesday, and people were applauding out in the streets. And then Thursday It was made Thursday, and then the press conference was Friday.
Correct.
And I got confused. I'm sorry.
I stay that way.
It happens. When we get to my age, then to your age, we have more.
What do you mean from my age then to your age?
Well, and he's got handcuffs. Anyway, let's get back. We were talking about when we left that let's say the prime thing. Everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing. All right, law enforcement's doing their job. The DA's doing his job. The drug task force is doing their job. All right, now we load the system up with 260 some people that are in the county jail. The county jail is only made for just under 200 people right now, with the extension of the annex that they have on there. I remember when I worked there, it was 135 tops would fit in that jail.
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
And now it's about 160 or 180 that can get in that jail not comfortably. I hate to use the word comfortably, but that it's designed for. Now we have 260 people in there. All right, well, we're overloading the system. Okay, that means Sheriff Meeks now has to address it, and food-wise, cost-wise, guard-wise, corrections officers, and security, the whole 9 yards builds up. Then you say, let's go ahead, and the DA is going to do the best they can to get these people rehabilitated, and we do have some great programs. Then we overload the rehabilitation program. There's got to be something other than doing that to it. I mean, and throwing them in jail forever ain't going to work, because there ain't no place in the Department of Corrections for them. I guess I'm looking for the proverbial answer of what can we do next.
Well, I think one of the things we have to look at, and you could talk, I would suspect, to the sheriffs of probably 85-90% of the Alabama counties, and they're going to tell you the same thing as, yes, I have more people in my jail than what I'm supposed to have. We're loaded up. I mean, imagine a large county like Mobile County and their metro jail, or Jefferson County, or for that matter, Montgomery County, and I dare say possibly even Houston County. The people that have more population, if you go on a per capita basis, they probably got more. And we have to keep on doing what we're doing. If they're committing a crime, we need to do our best to investigate it and then turn it over to the judicial system and let the judicial system do its thing. The more people they're putting out either on probation or on parole, of course, is just inundating our probation and parole officers, whether it's Covington County or Jefferson County or anywhere else. They've just got more than they can supervise.
I talked to one a while back. They had 100 caseload, individual.
When you have, and I bet you, I would bet you they've got more than that now.
Yeah.
But you cannot go out and keep up with that many folks. And of course, the parolee or the person on probation knows that. And of course, again, we do have a lot of parole and probation revocation hearings.
Well, you see a lot of violation of probations coming in through the JDR. You see the repeat offenders again coming in that are on probation. How many were on probation the other day?
There were several.
There over. I think they said 11 out of the 14 were on probation.
There were several of them that were indeed, and we hate to see this. Number one, I hate to see somebody get in trouble.
Right.
In a perfect world, everybody had a great job they really loved, and they would not go out and commit criminal acts in a perfect world. But this is, of course, an imperfect world, and so strictly as a law enforcement arm, we have to continue to do our job. And then our DA's office has to do their job. The people that are responsible for the incarceration of folks has got to continue to do their job. And we go on to the probation parole people who've got to continue to do theirs. And we can't quit doing our jobs because of problems. The problems do impact. We do the best we can with them. I think it's really important that we don't allow the problems to impact on our relationships with the various tiers that we deal with in this. I mean, they've got the same problems we've got. So we haven't here. Now, there may be some places that have. But we depend on, of course, the advice we get during a particular criminal incident from the DA's office, the legal advice we obtain, and we depend upon, of course, their successful prosecution of the case. And we depend upon that if the judge says, okay, this person's sentenced to X number of years, that somebody finds a place to put them. In terms of rehabilitation is a wonderful thing. It doesn't always work. There are some people that will go through the rehabilitative process just to stay out of jail. They have no intention of modifying their behavior once they complete the rehabilitative process. They're just looking for a way to stay out of jail. But we have to continue that. In terms of bed space at the state level within our penitentiary system, I don't know, Sheriff Joe out there in Maricopa County seems to have a pretty good idea.
Yep.
You can put up barbed wire tents and guard towers and put a lot of people behind it.
Air conditioning's not a requirement.
Yeah, and it gets a little warm out there.
Yeah.
And in the wintertime, it gets really cold. But he has heating systems within the tents, much like what the military used. Mm-hmm. And, I think about these guys and the conditions they live in Afghanistan and other places. Now, those guys are kind of my heroes. And if they can live like that, folks that have committed crimes, they can live that way too.
My son did that for a year. And it became so real to me hearing my son saying and looking at, because we could see what he was living in, and knowing that these guys in jail are upset because the cable TV isn't working, okay, or upset that they can't get this.
Don't have enough rec time.
No, not enough rec time.
There are no Hiltons in Afghanistan.
No, sir, and
there were none in Iraq.
No, sir, there weren't.
And I can tell you several other places. I didn't stagger into one. So, we're going to have to look at doing some things that A, will provide the adequate bed space, and B, will not overburden the taxpayers.
Well, here's where I want to go with this, and then that's why I asked you where we're to pre-up to this. I remember a program back in the 80s, 90s, and it kind of fizzled out now in the 2000s, and we've replaced it with what we call now an SRO officer. But we used to have a program that was called Say No to Drugs. Just say no. And I can remember that educating children back when my kids were in school, that was a huge program. And they would come home and they would be all pumped up about, say no to drugs, and educating them young like that. My son has never had, a drug issue. My daughter has never had a drug issue. They know what it means. They don't smoke. They don't, do all these things because they know, they were educated, okay, in this program. I have not seen DARE is what it was called, a DARE program here locally in a long time.
Well, the sheriff's office is still doing it.
Okay.
Deputy Gohagen. And he's still trying to do it. Of course, he has a lot of schools to cover.
Right, and the budgets have been cut.
Oh, sure, and that was my other comment. In terms of your budgetary considerations, I can't tell you the budget is getting better.
Right.
They're getting worse. But they're still trying to do it. And
but isn't it better to educate them in the beginning than trying to educate them after they've experienced it?
Well, sure, I would think it would be. But then we have to remember this. They have limited face time with these kids. Just like instructors in school have limited face time with these kids. And then it depends on the environment that the child returns to.
Right.
And if they see this going on around them and they start getting that peer pressure, it's hard to remember the tenets of that particular type of a program. So a lot of it, I think a lot goes back to parents need to want their children to be successful. If you're a good parent, you want your child's life to be better than what yours was. And you have to understand that if you really want these things, you must push them in school academically. A, they must go to school. B, when they go, they must listen to their instructors and learn. C, they need to do their homework. D, they don't need to cause a problem at school. And they don't need a problem with the police. So if your child's out running around at 1 o'clock in the morning here in Covington County, their options for good, clean fun are really limited, and really a lot of times there's nothing but problems out there that time of night. I have parents that get angry and they will call and say, well, the police stopped my kid walking, or the police stopped a car that had my child in it and stopped them and harassed them. And what you do is when you look at it, you find that what they did was they saw this car out in an area at a certain time, and so they made a contact with the car, say, hey, what's up, is everything okay? Y'all need to stay out of trouble. And that's not harassment, that is doing your investigative work and making sure that if nothing else, the people within that vehicle understand, well, the police are out. And now they know who we are. And that's a preventative type thing. We don't want to see kids, or for that matter, adults, get in trouble. We know it's going to happen. And if they're not at home and it's 11:30 at night or 1 o'clock in the morning, then parents should be proud, I would think, that whether it's the police here in Andalusia, the police in Opp or Florala, or a sheriff's deputy, is making contact with them, making sure that, hey, everything's on the up and up, they're fine. We're kind of taking care of your kids. We would prefer that they be at home with you at that time of day.
In our day, I hate to use age all the time with you.
You're killing me.
I know. No, it's the age, man. But in our day, I remember if we were out past 10 o'clock, I don't care if it was a weekend or weekday or summer or whatever, and an officer saw us out on the streets, they pick us up and take us to our house and knock on the door and say, Mr. Lewis, do you know your son's out here over at such and such?
Hey, they picked me up and taken me home a couple
They
times.
did me too.
And in Mobile, Alabama, they were not, they weren't shy at all. They saw you out, and they weren't always real nice either. But they'd find, what are you boys doing? You boys need to take it to the house,
And then Dad gets there and he looks at you and says, what are you doing out at 10 o'clock at night? And, and I'll always say this, it starts at home. Okay, everything starts at home. And, if you have a good foundation at home with your children and you have honesty and respect between your children and yourself, And there's lots of programs out there with the internet, with the social pages and all this stuff out there right now. There's a lot of support out there for children and adults to get help and do it in-house.
Well, you get one shot at raising a child,
Mm-hmm.
okay? You're going to make mistakes. I made mistakes because if you stop and think of everything we have to have a license for, one of the things we don't have to have a license for is to have a child.
That's right.
You know, you don't have to take a test, you don't have to take a program to have a child. It's up to the parents to be the clergy person. It's up to the parents to be the police officer. It's up to the parents to be the educator. And it's not an easy job. But if you're not going to make your kids do well in school academically, if you don't push your children to become involved in extracurricular activities, and as you know, whether it's being an ambassador or being in the band or being an athlete, whatever the case may be, joining academic clubs, you're not doing your job for your child. I believe that. Because if a kid's like I was, I'm looking for the path of least resistance most of the time when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep everything cool, and I could have my good time, and that's just part of being a child. But I really, I hope parents will really get involved with their children. The economics we deal with today make it extremely hard for a well-educated person to get a job. If a person is not well-educated, think of how hard it is for them to get a job, and when they get one, maybe it's making minimum wage with no benefits, whatever the case may be. We really need to start taking care of our children, keeping them out of trouble, cooperating with the educators, cooperating with your local law enforcement agency, and let's try to produce a couple of generations of academically prepared go-getters that can help us turn our country, our state, our county, and our cities around where we need to be.
Chief, you brought up something very interesting. In fact, I just had a conversation with a young man last night who I know very well, and we've had a good relationship over the past several years. He's in his mid-30s now, early to mid-30s. He made a huge mistake when he was 17 years old. All right, he had a felony conviction that he, plea bargain back then, okay, 18 years ago, whatever it is, I believe it is. Highly educated young man. This man has gone to college, even though he's got a felony. They don't stop you from going to college. They don't
Sometimes.
Stop. Right. But he's gone through the levels, and very intelligent, very good, hard-working young man. He came to me yesterday, he can't even get a job. So if you've got, it doesn't matter, okay, how long ago it was. So if you're a child and make a mistake at age 17 now, it's going to last forever.
Well, I think what we have to remember is, number one, there's only one perfect person that ever walked across the face of this earth. And of course, that was the Lord Jesus, and the rest of us have made mistakes. But in our world today, with the ability that people have to acquire information, you can make a mistake at 17 today and mess the rest of your life up.
Oh, yeah.
You can make a mistake as a young adult, 20, 21, and mess the rest of your life up. And that's what I'm saying. Parents must get involved and handle things at home and make sure your child is receiving the education that they need to be successful. And what is successful? Well, it may be when that child graduates, they go into the military, or it may be they go to college, or they go to technical school, or they go offshore, whatever the case may be. But give them the opportunity early in their life to be successful for the remainder of their life.
So they can have the choice. Because your choices change. Once, I told a new law enforcement officer this years ago, back when I was in the fire department. Back when it became the in thing to be, dressed up in the BDU pants and stuff like that, looked military-ish, and it put a lot of boldness in young police officers back then. And I'm glad to see your department and other departments around going back to the casual law enforcement type thing. But
well, actually, we never went to the BDU.
Right. But I'm just saying that back in that day, and I saw changes in law enforcement, especially in the young ones. And I walked up to him one day and I said, I said, I respect your job, what you do, and I respect everything about it. I respect everything that you're putting into it. But you have the ability as a law enforcement officer to change a person's life, whether it be for good or for bad. And you can change that whole outlook of that person, that one individual. I'm not saying be easy on them. I'm just saying, there's a lot of things that we have here in Alabama that we don't have in Orlando, Florida. And that is a little bit of sense that, what, if I do this today to this young man, I know, like you said, he's not perfect. All right, let's try to see what we can do. And we spend a lot of time in Alabama, and I'm saying this, I'll probably get kicked in the head for it. We spend a lot of time, and I think it's good time, all right, trying to look for another avenue to protect our children and the young people in this community than locking them up.
And that ball falls primarily within the Department of Youth Services court there. Mm-hmm. And I know for a fact they do many things, particularly with people that are first offenders, trying to get them squared away, trying to get the parents involved, trying to get the child involved in programs. But, I tell police officers that you have two weapons that you keep with you most of the time. And one, your biggest weapon is what's between your ears and the ability to cognitively think, which means you need to be thinking 2 or 3 steps down from what's presenting right in front of your nose right now. And then secondly is this thing right here.
It's a pen.
A pen can cost people money. It can cost people years out of their lives. So know what you're doing with this pen. If you will couple the pen with what's between your ears, you're going to really be effective.
It goes back to bringing this back to the home first. And then when they get involved with law enforcement, a first contact should always be looked at seriously, not as, Billy got, a traffic ticket, okay? A parent should really look at that and say, wait a minute, Billy hasn't been in trouble before. All of a sudden, boom, he got a ticket. There's something wrong. Time to sit down and talk to Billy again, all right? Billy comes home and says, well, that cop's harassing me out there. He's stopping me every time I turn around. We need to get Billy back in the house and start talking to him and finding out, because there's issues that are creating alerts to be set off to have contact with law enforcement to begin with.
Well, that and people that want to say, well, my kid's being harassed or whomever's being harassed, a lot of time that's the easiest answer to what the problem is. Well, y'all just harassing him. And you can go back and look at radio logs, and of course we view video, most departments do. And so something has drawn the officer's attention to that particular person.
The crosshairs kind of focus in.
So, it goes back to, it needs to be a cooperative effort. We try to make that a cooperative effort in OP. We want the parent to understand exactly what was done, what went wrong, what our response to it is. And I think last night I heard officers taking some children home.
I heard that. Yep.
And trying to get the problem squared away with the parent. It takes a lot of common sense and a lot of work to be a good parent. And it's not always fun. But we don't want to see kids condemn themselves to a mediocre life when they're still at a stage that all the wiring's not completed within their brains. Once this wiring gets completed, they normally will take a different view of certain situations.
Usually after the first child.
Yeah, I was one of them.
Gee, Mom, you're right. Gee, Dad, boy, now I know why you did that.
Imagine that, huh?
Hearing my son come back with that is priceless. I mean, it's been great. Right,
Yeah.
Teresa?
Yes.
While we're here,
Yes,
it is a couple things I'd like to mention and maybe get out to the folks here in the county.
please do.
One of the things we're starting to see more and more with at least a moderate frequency are forged instrument cases where people are forging checks. And of course they're forging most of them at area businesses. And we find that when we open an investigation and we go to the business, normally the business really can't tell us a whole lot at all about who brought the check in some events, what employee took the check and stuff like that. So I'd like to suggest to our local businesses that, hey, this is starting to happen more and more across the county. And yes, it takes a little time to prevent it. But if you want to recoup your money, it takes even more time. And you being a private businessman, I don't have to tell you that time is indeed money. Mm-hmm. So what we would ask you to do is when a person comes in and presents a check for payment, number one,
proper ID.
Photographic ID, whether it's an ID card or driver's license. And then please look at the ID and compare it to the person that's handing it to you. We have had men use women's IDs in past checks. Look at the ID, confirm, ask the person that you're currently doing business with, and then you write down either their state ID card number or their driver's license number. Again, we ask that the employee write it down, simply because when you let them write it down, we've had them write down false numbers. Mm-hmm. Imagine that. So have the employee write the ID number down, and then have the employee put their initials on the check, indicating that they're the person that took the check. Now, doing that really starts focusing on the suspect, and when you start focusing on the suspect, they're not quite as quick to pass the check. Mm-hmm. If I go into a store over here in Andalusia, and let's say the employee, they don't know who I am, and I walk into that store and I say, yes, I'm going to pay with a check, I expect them to ask me for my ID. I really do. And it does not offend me for them to ask me for my ID. It doesn't offend me if they ask me for my ID and all. I hope that they will. Matter of fact, I normally commend them for asking me for my ID, and it slows this down, because not only does it pose a problem for the business and the money they may lose, but of course it poses a problem for law enforcement and having to take the time to work these cases, particularly when the business hasn't been able to provide you what you need to adequately work the case. The only other thing I can just really suggest, and a lot of stores, of course, do have it, good videos that when a person walks up to the cash register, it gives a good picture of their facial area, really important, and then hang on to the video for 3 months. That way, if a situation does present itself, go back, pull it, and perhaps ID the person from that. But sure urge people to do this. You know, in our economy, we can't stand to lose money. And that's what we're doing. We're either losing the amount of what was written for the check, or we're losing both that as well as employee man hours trying to determine who wrote the check. And when you ask for that ID and you write down the identification number or the driver's license number and put your initials on it, that way the detective can come to you and say, okay, Mr. Smith, did you take this check on this day? Yes, that's my initials. What can you tell me? And you've got their ID number on it. That's going to take you right to where you need to go.
Well, Chief, I can remember years ago, and we're going to have to get on out of here, but years ago when I first started conducting business on my own after, getting out of school and becoming my own young adult, I remember going to Sears and Roebuck and having my first checking account. And back then, everybody took checks.
They have checking accounts then?
No, I had my first checking account.
Then?
Yes, sir. They were chiseled with.
Okay.
Okay. I can see humor here. Hey, at least I don't have to go look at Kevin every day.
Hey, look.
Okay, look. I mean, come on now.
Kevin's a fireman. And Kevin pulls me out of the fire every day, so I'm not going to say anything about Kevin.
Well, and Gigi is your other fireman.
Well, I've got several. I've got that. I've got Mark Kaiser.
Mark helps you out?
He will douse the flames.
Okay.
Our administrative assistant will douse the flames.
Here come the credits, folks.
we got a good crew.
Well, Walt and that whole crew back there in investigations is fantastic. And then your young man that you have over at Drug Task Force, David, is a wonderful gentleman and a very professional law enforcement officer.
We have two over there, actually.
Oh, do you now? That's right,
We've had two for a while.
That's right.
And yes, of course, it's just, I think this investigation that we've just completed would speak for itself.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is back in the check days, okay, they used to have a camera sitting right there with on a pedestal, and they put the check down on the table because it had a little platform, and they'd snap your picture. I mean, that don't happen today.
Well, it's just, I think a lot of stores feel like, hey, if we ask people for their identification, we're going to insult them, they're going to get mad, and they won't do business with us anymore. Well, I would encourage you to go to Montgomery or Dothan or Enterprise, some of these other places where that is just a matter of procedure. That is what the consumer or the customer is used to. Mm-hmm. That's what they expect. And, appreciate it, folks, if you're the consumer, because if they start getting stuck with a bunch of bad checks they're losing money on, between that and shoplifting, guess who the price increase is passed to?
Us. That's right.
It is us, the ID presenter.
Well, Chief, we got to go. Businesses out there, children, parents, there's a lot of information that's been put out here. We've got to get you back on. We've got to talk about IRT. We've got to talk about, continued information on the Drug Task Force. You brought up several things here today. The drug cartel, Mexican drug cartel, is in the area dealing, and they're providing a lot of this stuff, and a lot of people don't know that. They
don't. They think it's all along the border.
And they think it's all, manufactured here locally, and, we've got our own people. I can guarantee you there's probably not one place that makes meth ice here in Covington County.
Not that I'm aware.
Right, but it's a difficult process, more entailed, okay, than just making methamphetamine. And it would require a very good chemist to do that as well, from my understanding. I'm just going by from what I'm told.
I think you're correct.
And that in mind, we want you to come back and talk more about some of these other items. But most of all, I know, folks, and I'm telling you, from the DA's office all the way down to the local law enforcement officer, these men and women will help you. They're not there to throw you in jail just because they can. They're there to resolve the problem and the issue first. You may not agree with that. You say, Eddie, you're crazy. You favor law enforcement. I favor the freedoms I have today, and that those freedoms were given to us by men and women in the military, and then it's brought down into our Constitution and the laws that we have, and then the people that we have to take care of them for us and enforce them. And with that being said, you can't take the responsibility out of the house. The parents are the first line of defense. And if you can get a parent and a child together, you've done the right thing.
Absolutely.
So, Chief, thank you so much
for coming on. Thank you for having me.
All right. God bless you. I mean, he's got his Kevin, Lieutenant has his Scotty over at ABC, and then Chief over here has his Mike, and I'm going to get in trouble. Have a blessed day, everybody. Remember, keep it real, keep God in it. God bless you. We love y'all.